Love and obedience are foundational elements in the Christian faith, guiding how believers live out their spiritual journeys. At the heart of Christian life is the command to love first, to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and then to love our neighbors as ourselves. This love is not simply a feeling, but a deliberate, active choice to live according to God's will. It is the driving force behind all actions, thoughts, and relationships, calling believers to mirror the love that God has shown to humanity. Equally important is the role of obedience in the Christian life. Obedience to God is more than following a set of rules. It is a response to His love and guidance. Through obedience, we express our trust and faith in God's plan for our lives, and we align our actions with His purposes. Both love and obedience are interconnected, creating a life that reflects God's character and fulfills His will on earth. Love and obedience are inseparable in the Christian walk. Love for God is the foundation that fuels our obedience. When we truly love God, we desire to honor Him with our actions, and obedience becomes a natural expression of that love. As Jesus said in John 14:15, "If you love me, keep my commandments." Obedience, then, is the outworking of the love we have for God, demonstrating that our faith is not just theoretical or emotional, but active and practical. In other words, love for God compels us to live in a way that pleases Him by obeying His commandments and living in accordance with His teachings. It's through obedience that we show God that our love is genuine. Without obedience, love remains abstract and incomplete. True love for God is displayed through our actions, how we serve Him, how we treat others, and how we align our lives with His commands. This article will explore how living a life of love and obedience according to God's guidance leads to spiritual fulfillment and transformation. By examining the deep connection between love and obedience, we will discover how these principles shape our daily lives, guiding us toward peace, growth, and alignment with God's divine purpose. Ultimately, embracing love and obedience as central components of our spiritual journey helps us grow closer to God, fulfilling His will and bringing us true fulfillment in our walk of faith. God's love is central to the Christian faith and serves as the ultimate model for how we are called to love others. Unlike human love, which can often be conditional or limited by emotions, God's love is unconditional, sacrificial, and perfect. In 1 John 4:9-10, it is written, "This is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." God's love is not based on our worthiness, our actions, or our past mistakes. It is freely given, without expectation of return. It is the kind of love that sacrifices for the good of others, offering the ultimate gift through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Understanding the depth of God's love is crucial to how we reflect it in our own lives. God's love is the greatest example of how we should love, not just with words, but with actions that embody grace, mercy, and compassion. To truly reflect God's love, we must understand that it is not about seeking recognition or reward, but about giving selflessly, even when it is difficult. The more we comprehend the boundless nature of God's love for us, the more we are compelled to reflect it to others, no matter their background, beliefs, or actions. When we fully grasp the magnitude of God's love for us, it transforms how we see ourselves and others. It elevates our perspective, teaching us that love is not based on personal gain or convenience, but on the deep and sacrificial nature of God's character. This understanding of God's love inspires us to mirror it in our own actions, relationships, and attitudes. The greatest commandment given by Jesus is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Matthew 22:37-38. This is the foundation of the Christian faith. Everything else stems from this one act of total devotion and commitment to God. To love God with all your heart is to give Him your deepest affection, to prioritize Him above all else in life, and to make Him the center of your existence. It's a love that permeates every aspect of our being, from our thoughts and emotions to our actions and decisions. Loving God in this way means that our relationship with Him is not a part of our lives, but the very core of who we are. It affects how we make choices, how we treat others, and how we respond to life's challenges. When we love God fully, we are motivated to live in a way that honors Him through obedience, worship, and service. This love is not just a feeling, but an active, ongoing choice to align our hearts and lives with His will. It requires dedication, focus, and surrender. Recognizing that true love for God involves living according to His purposes and reflecting His goodness in our daily lives. Loving God with all our heart also involves cultivating a deep, personal relationship with Him through prayer, worship, and studying His Word. The more we invest in our relationship with God, the deeper our love for Him becomes. This love compels us to desire to know Him more and serve Him more faithfully. The love of God becomes the motivating force behind everything we do, and it directs our actions, attitudes, and decisions. The second greatest commandment, according to Jesus, is to love our neighbors as ourselves. Mark 12:31. Jesus taught that the love we extend to others should reflect the love He has shown us. This is not an easy command to follow, as it challenges us to love even those who may be difficult to love, those who hurt or misunderstand us, or those who are different from us. The love God calls us to offer is not conditional or selective. It is inclusive, generous, and sacrificial. Loving others as God loves us requires us to show kindness, compassion, and selflessness in our relationships. It calls us to go beyond our natural inclinations and to choose to act in love, even when it's challenging. This kind of love is not about feeling good or receiving something in return, but about giving of ourselves for the benefit of others. It's about actively seeking the well-being of others, just as God actively seeks our well-being through His care and guidance. One of the clearest ways we can love others as God loves us is through forgiveness. Just as God forgives us repeatedly, we are called to forgive others. Matthew 6:14-1-5. This is often one of the most challenging aspects of living out God's love, as forgiving others requires letting go of anger, resentment, and bitterness. However, when we forgive, we reflect God's mercy and grace, freeing ourselves and others from the burden of past hurts. Another powerful expression of God's love is empathy. Empathy allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of others, to understand their struggles, and offer support, comfort, and encouragement. This leads us to be active participants in other people's lives, not simply bystanders. It is through our acts of love and kindness that we can make a real difference in the lives of those around us, demonstrating the love of Christ in tangible ways. To reflect God's love in our daily lives, we must move beyond simply acknowledging it as an abstract concept and begin living it out in practical, meaningful ways. Here are a few concrete examples of how individuals can express God's love. Acts of service. Serving others is one of the clearest expressions of love. This could be as simple as helping a neighbor, volunteering at a local shelter, or supporting a friend through a difficult time. Jesus Himself set the ultimate example of service by washing His disciples' feet. John 13:1-17. When we serve others, we reflect Christ's humility and love, showing His care for all people. Forgiveness. As mentioned, forgiveness is a powerful way to reflect God's love. When we forgive those who have wronged us, we show the same mercy that God extends to us. This doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean releasing the desire for revenge and choosing peace over bitterness. Empathy and compassion. Taking the time to understand and share in the struggles of others is an act of love. Whether through listening, offering help, or praying for others, showing empathy creates a deeper connection and demonstrates God's love in action. Encouragement and kindness. In our everyday interactions, a kind word, a smile, or a simple gesture of encouragement can make a significant impact on someone's day. We can be vessels of God's love through words and actions that uplift others and remind them that they are valued and loved. Living with integrity. Reflecting God's love also means living a life of honesty, integrity, and authenticity. When we act with integrity, we show respect for others and for God's commandments, ensuring that our actions reflect His truth and goodness. These are just a few ways to reflect God's love in our lives. The key is to approach each day with an intentional heart to love, serve, and show compassion as Christ did. When we allow God's love to guide us in our thoughts, words, and actions, we make a difference in the lives of those around us, drawing them closer to God's love and truth. Obedience is often viewed as following rules or instructions, but in the spiritual context, it is much more than mere submission. Obedience, in its true form, is an active expression of love and trust in God. As Jesus said in John 14:15, "If you love me, keep my commandments." This verse illustrates that obedience is not about blindly following orders. It is about demonstrating our love for God by aligning our will with His. When we understand the depth of God's love for us, our natural response is to obey His commands, because we trust that He knows what is best for us. This kind of obedience comes from a place of relational trust and love. It acknowledges that God's ways are always higher than our own, and that His wisdom is perfect. Obedience in this context is not driven by fear, guilt, or obligation, but by a desire to please God and live in harmony with His will. It involves surrendering our own desires and choices and choosing to live according to the path God has laid out for us, even when it is challenging or goes against our personal inclinations. Moreover, obedience in love deepens our relationship with God. As we align our actions with His commands, we grow closer to Him. It's a continual process of surrendering our lives to His guidance, which brings us into a deeper intimacy with our Creator. This love-driven obedience also cultivates a sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that we are walking in the way that God has set for us. In many ways, God's commandments are the blueprint for living a fulfilling and meaningful life. Far from being burdensome or restrictive, the commandments of God are meant to guide us toward the abundant life that He has promised. In 1 John 5:3, it is written, "For this is the love of God, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome." Obeying God's commandments is not about following a set of rules, but about aligning our lives with the values and principles that God has established for us. God's commandments are designed to bring peace, protection, and blessings into our lives. For example, the commandments to love our neighbors, to honor our parents, and to avoid stealing or lying help create a harmonious and just society. They protect us from the consequences of sin and selfishness, guiding us to live in a way that reflects God's goodness and truth. The commandments are not arbitrary or restrictive, but are for our benefit, providing a framework for a life of purpose and integrity. When we obey God's commandments, we experience the peace that comes from living in alignment with His will. There is a sense of security and fulfillment in knowing that we are following the path that God has set for us. The blessings that come with obedience are not always material, but they are spiritual. Obeying God brings joy, peace, and a deep sense of purpose. It helps us grow in our faith, experience God's presence more fully, and live a life that is pleasing to Him. Furthermore, obedience to God's commandments also serves as a witness to the world around us. By living according to God's will, we set an example for others and show them the beauty and wisdom of living in alignment with divine truth. Our obedience can inspire others to seek God and follow His commands, leading them to experience the same peace and fulfillment. While obedience to God is vital for spiritual growth, it is not always easy. In a world that often promotes self-interest, rebellion, and the pursuit of personal desires, following God's guidance can feel countercultural and difficult. Obedience may require sacrifice, and at times, it may even go against our personal desires or the expectations of society. The challenges of obedience become especially apparent when we are asked to follow God's will during difficult or uncertain times. For example, God may call us to forgive someone who has wronged us, Even when it feels unfair, He may lead us to take a path that involves personal sacrifice, or to make decisions that others may not understand. In these moments, faith and trust in God are essential. When we obey God's commands, even when it is hard or contrary to our natural inclinations, we demonstrate our trust in His wisdom and His ability to work all things for our good. Romans 8:28. Faith is central to obedience in these situations. Faith allows us to trust that God's plan is better than our own, even when we cannot see the immediate benefits. It is faith that helps us believe that obeying God's commands, despite the challenges, will lead to spiritual growth, greater joy, and alignment with His will. Obeying God in difficult times also strengthens our faith, teaching us to trust Him more deeply and rely on His strength. It deepens our understanding that obedience to God is not about our comfort or convenience, but about living in trust, humility, and surrender to His divine purpose. Moreover, obedience in the face of challenges often leads to deeper character development. As we choose to follow God's guidance in difficult circumstances, we are shaped into individuals who are more resilient, patient, and compassionate. We learn to persevere through trials, growing in faith and strength as we see God's faithfulness in our lives. The Bible is full of examples of individuals who exhibited remarkable obedience to God, often in the face of great difficulty or uncertainty. These stories serve as models for how we can respond to God's call in our own lives, demonstrating the power and rewards of obedience. Abraham's obedience in sacrificing Isaac. One of the most profound examples of obedience in Scripture is found in the story of Abraham. In Genesis 22, God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, the child of promise. This was an unimaginable request, one that must have been agonizing for Abraham. Yet, Abraham obeyed, trusting that God had a greater plan. His obedience demonstrated an unwavering faith in God's promises, even when the command seemed incomprehensible. In the end, God provided a ram as a substitute sacrifice, and Abraham's obedience was rewarded with a reaffirmation of God's covenant. Abraham's willingness to obey, even in the most difficult circumstance, teaches us that true obedience is born out of trust in God's sovereignty and goodness. Jesus' obedience to the Father. The ultimate example of obedience is found in the life of Jesus. In Philippians 2:8, it says, "And being found in appearance as a man, He humbled Himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross." Jesus' obedience to the Father led Him to the ultimate sacrifice, His death on the cross, for the salvation of humanity. Jesus' obedience was not easy. It required Him to endure suffering, rejection, and death. Yet, His obedience was motivated by His love for the Father and His love for us. Jesus' example of obedience, even unto death, demonstrates the depth of commitment that comes with following God's will. The Israelites' obedience in the wilderness. The story of the Israelites during their 40 years in the wilderness is another powerful example of obedience. Despite facing numerous challenges, God called His people to obey Him in faith. Their obedience was tested at every turn, and while they often struggled and grumbled, those who remained faithful to God's commands were rewarded with the promise of the land flowing with milk and honey. Their journey is a testament to the power of patience and trust in God's timing, as well as the importance of obedience in the face of uncertainty. Living a life of love and obedience to God's guidance is a deeply transformative process. When we choose to follow God's will with a heart full of love, we open ourselves up to profound spiritual growth. Obedience, motivated by love, moves us closer to God, strengthening our relationship with Him. This transformation goes beyond merely following rules. It involves a radical shift in our hearts and minds that reflects God's love and purpose in all aspects of our lives. The act of loving God and obeying His commands requires us to change the way we view the world and ourselves. By choosing to align our actions with God's love, we are not just following commandments, but we are actively engaging in a deeper relationship with the Creator. As we grow in this relationship, our character is refined. Our attitudes, actions, and priorities begin to mirror God's nature, showing kindness, patience, and mercy in ways that we hadn't before. The fruits of this transformation include greater self-control, humility, and empathy, as well as an unshakable sense of peace and fulfillment. Living according to God's love and commands also leads to a greater sense of purpose. When we make love and obedience the foundation of our lives, everything else falls into place. We begin to understand that our lives are not about our own desires or ambitions, but about fulfilling God's higher purpose. As a result, we are able to live with clarity and direction, trusting that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. Obedience to God also leads to lasting internal transformation. We begin to shed negative habits, selfish desires, and patterns of behavior that separate us from God. Through this transformation, we are equipped to better serve God and others, drawing closer to the life of peace and joy that He promises. The more we embrace His commands, the more we experience His presence, and the more we are transformed by His love. This transformation ultimately brings us to a place of greater spiritual maturity and a deeper connection to our divine calling. True love and obedience to God are demonstrated not just in moments of worship or prayer, but in the consistency of our daily lives. Integrity, living in a way that is honest, moral, and aligned with God's truth, reflects our commitment to God in every circumstance. A Christian's life of integrity means that we do not compartmentalize our faith, but rather allow God's principles to influence every area of our lives. At home, at work, in school, and within our communities. Living with integrity means that our actions match our beliefs. For example, in our personal relationships, we show love, respect, and honesty. At work or school, we conduct ourselves with fairness, diligence, and compassion. In the community, we offer service and support, and we stand for justice and kindness. Every day offers us countless opportunities to reflect God's love and obedience in the choices we make. It's not just about following religious rituals, but about living out our faith in a way that is visible to others, ensuring that God's love is demonstrated consistently through our actions. Consistency is key in showing love and obedience. It's easy to act in love and obedience during church services or when surrounded by fellow believers. However, the true test of our faith comes when we encounter challenges, frustrations, or temptations in everyday life. In these moments, it is our consistency in living out God's love and obeying His commands that makes all the difference. If we are consistent in loving others, even when they are difficult, and obedient to God's commands, even when it's hard, we will become examples of His love to the world around us. Living with integrity and consistency means being authentic and true to our Christian principles, regardless of the circumstances. When we do so, we reflect God's love in a powerful way, and our lives become a testimony of His grace and truth. This consistency in living out our faith not only shapes our personal spiritual growth, but also influences others, drawing them closer to God through our example. When we live according to God's love and commands, we experience profound peace, joy, and fulfillment. These blessings are not always tied to material wealth or worldly success, but to a deep sense of contentment that comes from knowing we are aligned with God's will. By living in obedience to God, we experience the peace that surpasses understanding. Philippians 4:7. This peace is not dependent on external circumstances, but flows from the deep assurance that we are in harmony with God's purpose for our lives. Obedience to God also brings joy. Jesus said in John 15:10-11, "If you keep my commandments, you will remain in my love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete." There is a deep, abiding joy that comes from living in obedience to God, knowing that we are fulfilling His purpose and walking in His will. This joy is not fleeting or tied to temporary circumstances, but is rooted in the peace of knowing we are loved by God and fulfilling the purpose He has set for us. Furthermore, living according to God's guidance brings fulfillment. When we align our lives with His will, we experience a sense of purpose that transcends personal ambitions and desires. We begin to understand that our lives are part of a larger, divine story, and we find fulfillment in serving God and others. The fulfillment that comes from following God's commands is deeply satisfying because it aligns with the deepest desires of our hearts to love and serve Him, to love others, and to live in the fullness of His grace. A life lived in love and obedience has the power to inspire and influence those around us. As Christians, our lives are meant to be reflections of God's love, drawing others closer to Him. When we live with integrity, kindness, and consistency, we demonstrate the power of God's love in real, tangible ways. This witness can have a profound impact on those who encounter it, whether they are family members, friends, co-workers, or strangers. Our actions, motivated by love and obedience, can inspire others to seek a deeper relationship with God. When others see the peace, joy, and fulfillment that comes from living according to God's guidance, they are more likely to be curious about our faith and want to experience the same transformation. Our love and obedience serve as a testimony to the goodness of God, and as we share His love through our actions, we invite others into the same relationship with Him. In addition, living out God's love and obedience can create a ripple effect in our communities. When we extend kindness, forgiveness, and compassion, we contribute to building a society that values love, respect, and mutual support. Our communities can be transformed as we become vessels of God's love, spreading His message of hope and salvation to those around us. Living a life of love and obedience, then, has far-reaching consequences. Not only does it transform us, but it also impacts those we interact with. By living according to God's will, we become instruments of change, bringing light into the darkness and helping others experience the love of Christ. Living a life aligned with God's love and commands is the key to personal transformation, spiritual fulfillment, and peace. As we reflect God's love and obey His commands, we experience deeper intimacy with Him and grow in our character, integrity, and purpose. Our consistent actions, fueled by love and obedience, impact not only our lives but the lives of those around us, drawing them closer to God and creating positive change in our communities. By living in alignment with God's guidance, we become vessels of His love, shining His light to the world. Living a life of love and obedience according to God's guidance is at the heart of spiritual fulfillment. By understanding and embracing God's love, reflecting it in our daily actions, and obeying His commands, we align ourselves with His divine will. This alignment is what enables us to grow spiritually, experience peace, and fulfill the purpose He has created for us. Love and obedience are not separate from one another but are deeply interconnected, with love motivating us to obey and obedience deepening our love for God. When we combine love and obedience, we open the door to spiritual growth, peace, and fulfillment. Obedience to God's commands is not a mere duty, but an act of love that strengthens our relationship with Him. By choosing to live according to His will, we reflect His goodness, mercy, and purpose, and our lives become a testimony to His grace. The act of loving and obeying God transforms us from the inside out, shaping our hearts to be more like His and guiding us toward the abundant life He promises. Embrace God's love and seek to obey His commands in every area of your life. Let His love be the guiding force in all that you do, allowing it to direct your thoughts, words, and actions. Trust that by living in accordance with His will, you will experience the transformation and fulfillment He desires for you. As you live out this love and obedience, you will find deeper peace, stronger faith, and a life that reflects His divine purpose. Let this journey of love and obedience lead you to the abundant life God has prepared for you.